The return of Taijuan Walker did not quite bring back the good vibes that the Phillies were hoping, as they dropped another one at the hands of Miami Marlins and continue to be trending in the wrong directions. It feels this team may be at a breaking point, and I'm going to break down why this team needs to switch things up, what's going wrong on the field, and overall everything else that has to do with this depressing Phillies team right now. It truly was one of the more lifeless losses that I've seen last night, and that's really telling based on a team that sold all their talent at the deadline, and with all due respect, had a guy named Valente Belazzo on the mound who's pitched a grand total of under 27 innings at the major league level before leading into that game. Now, before I dive fully into this Phillies team, I do want to remind you guys, make sure you are smashing that subscribe button. That just 7.3% of you guys tuning into the videos have subscribed to the channel just yet. We want to get this Phillies family growing. I was hopeful that we were going to be in it for a long postseason run. I'm skeptical at this point. I'm worried about this team, so I need the Phillies community to rally around and help us all get through this together. Now, to talk a little about what went wrong, I first want to start with Taijuan Walker. That me and Luke got here on the mics yesterday, and you can check out that video on the channel as well, and talked a lot about, we're going to know very quickly whether this could be a potential return of Taijuan Walker, if he does have his stuff back, if this was a legitimate, blister injury or grip injury or whatever the factor is that he just did not have his stuff early on in the season. And unfortunately, the answer to that is quite clear to me, and is that Taijuan Walker just is no longer a high-level Major League Baseball player, and I might even just say straight-up Major League Baseball player. Now, I don't want to rag on Taijuan Walker too far in this video, because the reality is he was not the problem last night. Overall, he pitched 4 innings, he allowed 4 hits, 3 earned runs, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts, and a home run, but I will say it was a lot uglier than that stat line would indicate there. Walked 2 batters in the first inning, didn't have a lot of control, was fighting from behind in counts a ton, and got bailed out on a couple pop flies, some deep fly balls there. The bottom line is he got his way through it. He did pitch 4 innings, but the reality is that my level of optimism for Taijuan Walker being any part of this Phillies team turning around is pretty much at zero to this point. Now, I understand that contracts do tend to dictate things in sports, and it's clear that the Phillies showed their belief in Taijuan Walker with their wallets early on in his Phillies tenure. That he was a guy signed here with the intention of him being a key part of the bottom part of this rotation, this Phillies team, and it doesn't look like that's going to pan out. Now, the reality is I still expect to see him on the mound. This is not something that I'm saying we should expect Rob Thomson to yank him out of the starting rotation. And the bottom line is they're still fighting for bodies right now. We're still waiting for a guy like Ranger Suarez to work his way back in the mound, who's in the process of his rehab assignment. That even a guy like Christopher Sanchez has somewhat fallen off a cliff the second half of the year. And another option, Spencer Turnbull, is a guy who continues to have setbacks in his recovery and ultimately seems dead set on, if he does return to the Phillies this season, will be pitching out of the bullpen extensively. So the reality is Taijuan might be the devil that we have to deal with at this point. And we shouldn't be worried for the point that the Phillies are going to rely on Taijuan Walker in the postseason. But what I will say is that they are going to need him to get to a bye position. If you want that first round bye, which I know there's plenty of polarizing feelings about at this point, the reality is they just need Taijuan to pitch better, and they need a guy to eat up some innings because the staff could use it more than anything right now. Now, I spoke a lot about Taijuan early on in this video, but I do want to acknowledge that I do not blame last night's loss on him whatsoever. The reality is that this is absolutely the lineup that is the issue. That you put up 0 points against, once again, Valente Belazzo, who pitched just over 26 innings at the major league level coming into last night. And looking, and these are the stats against the starter that they have tonight, so a little bit more room for optimism, but it was straight up lifeless last night. This was a team that could not get anything going. The top half of the lineup just 1 for 15 last night. And we're talking about Johan Rojas looking like legitimately one of the better batters in this Phillies lineup. I mean, if to pull up the stats directly here, we're talking about Johan Rojas having a higher batting average than Bryson Stott and Brandon March. That simply cannot happen. And I like Johan Rojas. I've been impressed with him. I do think he's a winner at his core and a guy that does a lot of the little things, but that certainly should not be a stat that is flexing in his favor. With the amount of money that is distributed to the big bats on this roster, there simply have to be better results to that. And that's where I get to my point that right now, there needs to be some changes within this Phillies team. That I understand they want to stay the course, that Rob Thomson at his core is a guy that's kind of one of his calling cards as a manager. He's going to trust his guys. That's been one of my biggest criticism from him in general, is he does rock with his guys to the end, even when it is clear-cut that shouldn't be the reality. Nick Castellanos is a clear-cut example of of him continuing to back Castellanos behind Harper in the postseason in a situation which Harper was just not seeing pitches because they wanted to get to Casty. That kind of stuff's unacceptable, but the reality is I need Rob Thomson to dig into his bag of tricks and figure out something. If that means sending Brandon Marsh back down to AAA for a little bit, if that means DFAing Garrett Stubbs, giving Marchand a chance, if that means sending Bryson Stott down, there has to be something that is a kick in a butt to this Phillies team. And I understand that everything that is being said is the right things from this locker room. For example, I'll pull up Kyle Schwarber last night being asked about it after the game, and he mentions his exact quote here saying, "No, not at all. No, I think the group that we have is one of the most talented I've been around and some of the best dudes I've been around. You go 1 through 9 in that order. You go through our staff, you go through our bullpen. We've assembled a really good team, and we've assembled a bunch of good dudes too. That's why for us, there's frustration. You're going to see us really come together, and we're going to figure this thing out. I promise you will be better for it at the end." And while I appreciate the sentiment from Kyle, and I have no doubts about what a great leader he is, the reality is the production just straight up is not good enough, and there's no amount of flipping the switch that I think is going to happen until there's some action from within the staff. It is straight up lifeless, again, is the number one thing that I would sum up this Phillies team. That watching that game from start to finish last night, there was not a single second in which there was a belief that, okay, it's coming this inning. They're going to have a break there. There's some just at-bats that are discouraging to watch. Everything about this Phillies team is bad right now, from the bullpen to the starters to the hitters. And I do put it on the high-dollar contract guys at the plate for the biggest reason at this point in time. You do simply have to get more production there. And that is why I'm back on Rob Thomson needing to send a message. Maybe that is having Trey Turner take a step back, and to acknowledge him, shout out to Tom Kelly for the tweet here, that if his calculations are correct, Trey Turner is hitting 175 with 3 home runs and 7 RBIs since the All-Star break. Early in his contract, but so far the majority of his Phillies career has been a disaster. And by the way, that was before he went 0 for 3 or 0 for 4 at the plate last night. Not great from Trey Turner there. Again, it just has to be better. And I understand that baseball is a game of failure, that you're going to go through your ups and downs. But I just want to point out this does not feel like a regular lull to me. They have found every way possible to lose baseball games in recent. They've had games where they don't show up. They have games in which they've had walk-off hits against them. They have games where they've walked in game-winning runs against them. It just has been brutal to watch. And I keep seeing these comparisons to last year's Eagles team. And the reason that I push back and feel like this is different is when you think back to last year's Eagles team, yes, we didn't truly know what was going on behind the scenes, but you kind of did. That you knew there was a disconnect between Sirianni and Jalen Hurts there. You knew that Jalen Hurts didn't look exactly like himself, that knee injury was clearly lingering, that there were play call issues with this team. Then you compare that to this Phillies team. They're the exact same as they were in the first half of the season. No, the production isn't, but these players are. And there's nothing from the play call that is going wrong. There's no injuries that have really popped up of note. Sure, Ranger Suarez and a couple of the arms in the bullpen. There have been some names that have popped on there, but Bryce Harper's been healthy. Trey Turner's been healthy. Nick Castellanos has been healthy. JT Realmuto, for the most part, has been healthy and also has been incredibly poor in recent times. So it just is insane to me. I don't understand this night and day switch, and it's even more frustrating because we understand how good this team can be. So I can't figure out in my brain what specifically needs to change. I've sat there last night trying to dig in. What is the number one thing that is wrong? And I just keep landing on, it feels like all of it right now. So I do want to hear from you guys to wrap things up here. What do you think the biggest issue with this Phillies team is? Is it Rob Thomson not pulling the strings in the right way? Does he need to act and make a change within this roster? Is it a lineup changeup that needs to be done? Is it with the players directly? Do they simply need to play better? That the production is just not at the level it needs to be? I think it's a lot of everything, but I do want to hear from you guys on what are your biggest concerns. And one more time, just remind you guys to make sure you are smashing the subscribe button on the channel here. Once again, 92.7% of you guys have not hit that button just yet. We got to get through this together, Phillies Nation. Want you with me every step of the way. So make sure you're smashing that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video and your comments below. And I'll be talking to you next time on Phillies Digest, hopefully on some brighter spirits.